Welcome to the Jeremiah Show. If a person's life can be compared to a book of chapters, this man has lived the equivalent of Tom Clancy's series. His life would fill many books, full of adventure and love, with many exciting chapters. Some read tea leaves, some read the stars they were born under. I read the laugh lines around someone's eyes to determine what type of life they have lived. They are telling, aren't they? Those laugh lines, the smile lines on a person's face. My very special guest today has some great laugh lines, along with an easy smile and a deep, genuine laugh. From the moment I first met Jim Dries back on episode 414, Miss Lillian Part 1 and Part 2, with Steve Ullman, his wife Carol Swarbrick, I like Jim. We immediately struck up a friendship and a repertoire with each other, uh, half teasing, half joking, half prankster. We would debate back and forth through emails or text messages or even over the show in a good natured way. We argued who was cooler. I was always arguing Jim was cooler.
Yeah.
And so the answer is he is. Jim Dries has published two novels. He and his wife, actress Carol Swarbrick, also wrote a true story of their romance together. And the book is called Better Late Than Never, a Love Story. They also wrote a play together, Miss Lillian, More Than a President's Mother. It was performed across the United States and throughout Canada. The play was later used as the basis for a docudrama that is currently streaming on several platforms, including Amazon Prime. Miss Lillian, More Than a President's Mother, you can check it out on their website, misslillian.com, and on Facebook on the Lillian Carter story. You can purchase and stream the film via misslillian.com and the various platforms there. The principal cast is just incredible that they put together for their film. President Jimmy Carter, former First Lady Rosalind Carter, Sam Donaldson, Tommy Lasorda, and actress Carol Swarbrick. Jim has taught in Hawaii and New York. He received an award from the Rockland County Bar Association for his work in law education. He's got a new novel out right now, and what a perfect time. I can't think of a better stocking stuffer for someone that you love than Jim Dries' new novel called Commies, Cuties, and the CIA. Welcome, Mr. Jim Dries. Welcome back.
Thank you, Jeremiah. Great to be here. And you are definitely the cooler guy. You're definitely the cooler
Here we go again.
guy. So, with
How
all
are
the
we
people
going to
you
settle this?
surround yourself with, there's just totally got to be all that cool rubbing off on you. You're just building it up.
Well, I think you hit a point there, Jim. The only reason maybe there is I have any cool at all is that I surround myself by cool people, which again takes us back to you and how cool you are. And we're gonna find out how cool you are. When you were here last, we were talking about the film, and we can talk about that again today as well. But I would send people back to that episode, those part one and part two, because we had the really kind of the principal, I would say, production crew and actress Carol Swarbrick on. But we had the editor, we had the director, we had the producer. Really a neat kind of a behind the scenes at Miss Lillian, um, More Than a President's Mother. It was really cool. I love that. So, and today I really want to spend the time on you, Jim, and you've got such a incredible life. Like I said in the beginning, the chapters of your life. It's almost like you knew what you were doing.
I was under a star. That's all I can say. I have these discussions with Carol. And by the way, whatever cool I have, I'm like you. I got lucky to get myself surrounded by a whole bunch of people, including like the people that made the Lillian Carter film. All aces, just incredible, hardworking but lovely people. Great sense of humor. Always kept perspective. And that's kind of been the way throughout my life. People who I grew up with in the Peace Corps, people I taught with, students and teachers, and on and on. It's just I am so cool, and if I am cool, it's because of all these people I get to be around. So so there we are. Um, so thank you.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I think that they're drawn to you for sure, as I was. You and I, you got a twinkle in your eye, and you and I just started having fun right away from, over Zoom. That's pretty in different states. I think that's a that's a testament to a personality coming through on a flat screen, and coming to life and connecting. Um, but yeah, I think that you are right that the people that come through your life and that you have an opportunity to welcome into your life, if you are open to that and you see the person in front of you, and you're curious about people like I am, and I know you are. um, if you like to see the best in people, they add to your life, right? They add layers to your life, and if you let them in, and you get to know them, I think that adds to someone's character, you know.
Absolutely. And I went back to your point about I am very lucky. I have this round on and on, going round and round discussion with Carol because I was the youngest of six. My parents were in their 40s. I was 7 years after the last one. I was clearly the accident. And Carol says, no, you weren't an accident. You were a miracle. And in many ways, my life has been like that. It's been filled with miracles. One thing after another that happens. A door slams and, you know, another one opens, not just a window, another door opens, and I get to walk through it. So,
Mm.
you know, family, friends, acquaintances, it's been fabulous. Yeah, absolutely.
Jim, you grew up with a really big family in Iowa. What did your parents do? Or did you live on a farm, or what did they do for a living?
Well, that's the common question when somebody's from Iowa, because
Kind
when
of
I was
family.
I grew up in Sioux City, which is like about 100,000, fairly big for the Midwest. But they assigned me in an agricultural area because they were sure that since I grew up in an agricultural area, I didn't. But my parents grew up on a farm. Um, my parents, again, to give you an idea of the age here, they were born in the 1890s. My grandfather was born in 1853. So we got a lot of generations there. But for various reasons, they had to leave the farm. My dad lost his right hand in a farming accident when he was 30. And he had to learn life all over again. He had to learn to write again. He had to learn to do things with his left hand that he never thought he would do. Uh, so I, and my mom was hard of hearing. She had diphtheria when she was 13. So I grew up with people that had challenges, but they never complained. They never complained. I never thought they were handicapped. When I was at a parent teacher conference growing up, one of my teachers said, "Oh, your parents are handicapped?" I was like, "Oh, I guess they are by definitions, but not by their life. I mean, they struggled. They had a tough life. I think maybe got through eighth grade, and that was it. So, but
Do
they
you
raised
think
six kids.
their tough life
Yeah,
to them was just, a day in the life, and you get past it? Do you have challenges? Were those important lessons that maybe weren't stated, but were understated and observed and appreciated by you subconsciously? Or
absolutely. And I always envied my father's discipline. I wish I had it. He could open a can of beer, have a sip, put a plastic cover on it, and make it last through the week. He could have he could have one cigarette out of the pack after dinner. That was it. And he never touched another one till the next day.
that's
That,
discipline. And you know what? Some of my favorite, um, I would say, people that I look up towards in the hospitality business, mentors like Tim Rooney, up in Orchid, California, ran an Irish bar, strong Irish family, and they had a microbrew, and they would sit out. They would have one cigar at the end of the night and one glass of beer from their hard day's work, and watch the fog roll in. And to me, that's such a romantic, very very cool memory as far as just the atmosphere and the person and they were so quiet, but it was this shared cigar and this, just like we did a hard day's work. It sounds like your dad.
Yep. And those fantastic memories never leave you, just like now. You can remember it and you can appreciate it and you can get a smile on your face when you share it.
Yeah, yeah, it's true. Um, you had six brothers and sisters.
Altogether, there were six of us. I had one brother.
Altogether six. What number were you, Jim, in the pecking order?
Well, you see, there were four sisters. So when my brother was finally born after four sisters, I'm sure my parents thought, done, we did it. I got my boy. I'm sure my dad thought, but like Carol said, miracles happen.
So your brother was the last of the youngest. You're the second to the youngest.
No, he was born after the four.
Oh,
And
so then you're last.
I was born 7 years later after him.
You're the baby.
Um, okay, maybe.
Uh, so in high school, you attended a seminary with the intention of serving overseas as a missionary in Africa and Asia, and also you'd like to work with the poor in America, which I don't hear enough of. I know I'm not taking away anything from anyone, but we have so many problems now with homeless and people that just need some help in America. With food shortages, food what's the word? They can't afford the groceries and the rent and the electricity and the heat and all those things. It just adds up and there's usually a deficit. I liked seeing, working with the poor in America was one of the goals. How did you choose though Africa, Asia in high school? How did you choose these places that you wanted to go? And what
Well,
was the goal as a missionary? How did that get inspired?
the group I went to was a group founded in the 1870s in France, and they expanded around the world. They had a seminary in Indiana, in the United States, obviously, and that was their mission. They went to areas that were considered underdeveloped or in need, whether it was I'm sure they did the same thing in France, but when they went to another country like America, then they would do that in America. Africa and Asia were also part of their mission. There was that, not to get too far afield on this, but there was that whole group within the church. It was called the Society for the Propagation of the Faith, and they used to have fundraisers in grade school when I was going to grade school to get money to buy what they called pagan babies and to baptize them. So at an early age, there was this awareness of this need beyond the United States, beyond our borders, and that just was the order that I was drawn to. It just made sense to me. I think I was very lucky. I was raised in a diocese where the priests were very socially conscious, and they very much carried out the mission that's taught not only by Jesus but all religions around the world, to do good, to help the poor, to alleviate suffering, and that sounded good to me.
Was there a particular person that inspired you, Jim,
Well,
to
I
do
had
this life?
actually one of my uncles, one of my great uncles, was the oldest priest in our diocese, and he was always praised and elevated by my family. And then I had a first cousin who became a priest also, who was, I mean, he was like 6'2". He could match John Wayne with the Cary Grant kind of looks, and it was like, wow, these are kind of cool things to aspire to. And of course, there was that old Catholic tradition. I mean, these people grew up. My family grew up in towns where they spoke German on the phone when they talked to each other. They still carried on those old world traditions. You give one to God, so one of your children should either be a priest or one should be a nun. Best if the priest was a man and the nun was a woman.
Why do you, Jim, suppose you were drawn so much to serving others in far off places? Was there a particular event? I mean, you've explained this is how it's done, and this is what we do, and this is what you observed and saw, and it inspired you. But was there a particular event that you can recall where
Well,
you
nobody
thought
asked
this
me
would
that.
really be, this is where I should be
That's a
because
great question, and I think I've never really examined it, but off the top of my head, it was probably I grew up when Franklin Roosevelt was still president. I don't remember much of it. I do remember the rationing coupons from World War II that my parents had in their household. And I remember the idea of scarcity and the idea of planning. And then after the war, through a Catholic Relief Services group, we got connected with a German family, the Catholic Relief Services did this. They connected American German families with German families that needed help for reconstruction, rebuilding after the devastation of the war. And we sent packages and we had letters, and they would explain things to us, and uh, they brought to us through the mail images and pictures of what was going on in Germany and what needed to be done to rebuild. And I think that image of the need can be anywhere, and the appreciation that we received from this family that was, they were the enemy in World War II,
hmm
but they were human beings now who needed help. Um, and I think that probably really struck home at that point. I mean, I was 7, 8 years old.
Was there a big German community in Sioux City, Iowa at that time?
There were a lot of individual communities of that nature in different areas. Where my dad grew up, there was a German community in his town. Where my mother grew up, there was a German community in her town. That's how they got together. There was sort of like Match.com version
hmm
in the diocesan newspapers that the church published, where if you had a son or daughter that was a marriageable age and you were a son or daughter looking for somebody, you could start a pen pal relationship. And that's how my parents met. And it was as close as I think we get in America, in most communities anyway, to arranged marriages. They had barely met at all. So
Could you feel, was there any animosity as as a German family? Could you feel after the war? Could you feel that at all as a young boy?
I couldn't, and maybe it's because my family was all German. They had probably it was more kind of a sense of disappointment because our generation did not learn German like they did. As I said, my grandfather was born in 1853, came to this country in the 1880s, and they pretty much emphasized German culture, not Hitler. There were no there were no swastikas. There was no love for Germany in the political sense of World War II. But it was still that these were people. But all these little communities in the Midwest, it's fascinating. I'm sure sociologists have written about it. Were all connected together. There were Protestant Orange Dutch Protestant communities in a place called Orange City, and they would have tulip festivals. There were German communities where my mother grew up. The church was the only school in town. There was no public school. It was just the church school. And like I say, they all spoke German. My father left me when he passed away. It was his first Holy Communion prayer book from I guess it would have been about 1910, 1911. It's all in German. It was all in German. And yet there was no sense of loyalty to Germany. It was just a sense, because when they came over, there wasn't even Germany. It was still Bavaria and Prussia. It wasn't even Germany.
Hmm.
So it was just the culture and the religion. The religion was the big thing. The worst thing I could do, and I had to sneak to do it because I'm going to do it. You shouldn't date a Lutheran girl because Martin Luther was the one that caused the problem.
Hmm.
And that was worse than dating just about anybody else. And of course, I dated a Lutheran girl who I had to meet outside of her house on the corner too, because her parents didn't want her dating a Catholic boy. And yet, ironically enough, my mother's favorite Christmas song was "Away in a Cradle," which of course was written by Martin Luther. So
Wow. That's some, that's a good, I like that. That's the kind of giving us a full picture of what you grew up in and around and influences. We do have, I look at our, where people listen around the country, around the world, and Sioux City, Iowa is one of the cities that we have listeners in. And I've always been curious about Sioux City. How would you describe it? This is a new question off of my script, but I'm just curious. I mean, I got a guy from Sioux City, Iowa. I got to ask the question. I've always been curious about this city.
It's a great place to raise a family. It's a wonderful community. A lot of my relatives are still there. Opportunities were a little bit limited. I would say in general, it's seen better days. Interstate highways had a lot to do with that. The interstate highway going up from Omaha, Council Bluffs area goes up to Sioux Falls, and then they catch an interstate that goes across Minnesota and South Dakota, and then it goes on up to North Dakota where they catch another interstate. There's no interstate running right through Sioux City that it connects with. So Sioux City is it's a beautiful town if you like cold winters and hot summers. um,
Good spot to eat there, Jim. Where would you recommend? You got a spot in mind, or have you been there for a while?
oh, it's your typical Midwestern food. You can pretty much go to any place where you get meat and home fries and bacon and they don't have grits there like they do down south, but it's I wouldn't know these days the kind of food I'm looking for was a little more health oriented, a little less beef, a little less fat. I have a little trouble finding places in Sioux City.
Got to get into your bathing suit out there in Florida a little bit more, don't you? Looking good, trying to look good. Um, okay, we got to take a real quick break. I just want to make the point, though, that the life that you chose, and we're going to continue to explore your life with Jim after the break here. So please don't go anywhere. It's very fascinating, I promise you, um, the life that you lived. But it strikes me that it was very unselfish, and I like it. I know there are so many unselfish people out there that give and help others. Uh, I like the theme, though. I think we need more of that. People that are unselfish and kind of look to help humanity and see how they can contribute. And that's, I would imagine you would agree with me, Jim, probably a pretty satisfying life.
Don't
No
make me
how
ashamed.
much you can give.
I'm somewhere between Mother Teresa and Jeffrey Dahmer, a little more close to the Mother Teresa part, but I've had my times. A lot of people would disagree that I'm anything close to being a really wonderful, caring, great couple ex-wives might have a different view of things. But thank you, Jeremy. That's very kind. Very kind.
We won't ask them. Don't worry. I'm not going to surprise you with them on the show. We're talking with Jim Dries. He's a writer, humanitarian, so many different things. I couldn't give him all the titles out, but he's got a new novel out. I'd love for you to check it out. Commies, Cuties, and the CIA. You can find it on Amazon. And we'll be right back with more from Jim Dries. See if Richard's paying attention. Ah, he is. I didn't know you were listening, Richard. Hey, Richard, I don't see Jim's novel up. Is it up? Cover? He's doing another show in another studio. Here we go. Let's put that bad boy up there. I want to help sell some books, Jim. Let me know if we sell any. Hopefully, that would be great.
Sure, I sure will.
I mean, from the show, I know you'll sell them
We
on
get
your
you
own.
a copy?
What's that?
We get you a copy?
Did I get a copy? No, not yet, but I will. Let me buy it. I will support.
I get some freebies. I get some
I
freebies.
know, but I want to support, so let me buy it. I will. I I wish I would have been able to read it before the interview. I'm going
Wow.
to be in Palm Springs next week, and I'll take a copy out there and read it.
You're probably going to be busy there, Jeremiah.
By the pool.
Yeah.
I'm going to be busy raising my hand and asking for another cold beer. There we go.
I wish I could join you.
Yeah, well, come on out. Um, let's see how it looks here. Can I see it? Will we be able to see it? It's a good looking cover, Jim. I like that.
I had a graphic artist friend who put that together. She's fantastic. Her name is Ann York. You did a great job. Thank you. I'm very
Yeah, it pops, and I want to know about this the Cobra, but maybe we can tell it when we get to the book if you want to talk about it.
sure.
Okay, let me. Sorry, I should have got back to my place here. Okay. Sorry, guys. I should have got back to while we instead of goofing around. Okay. Okay. Welcome back to the show. We have Jim Dries. He's the author of Commies, Cuties, and the CIA. If that's not a title for you, we've got if you're on the YouTube channel watching the interview here, we've got the jacket up, and boy, that's great. We're going to get to the book towards the end, Jim, but the graphics on this novel, the cover is just beautiful. You said you have a graphic artist friend that designed this for you.
That's correct. Yeah, yeah. Ann York, she lives out in Temecula, California,
Hmm.
and I've known her through her unfortunately recently deceased, but husband Don York, who is a great artist in his own right.
Yeah, like it's great. And we can find all your books on Amazon, right? Under Jim Dries, Dries.
I hope so.
Well, yeah, they may be sold out, so get there now. Get the reserve your copy. Send the copy to someone that you love. I recommend that you pick more than one and send it out to different people that love to read and to read really great novels from Jim Dries. Again, it's Commies, Cuties, and the CIA. He's our special guest today. Let's pick up where we left off in college. Jim, we're tracing your life here, which is so fascinating. Um, it does read like a great adventure novel. You know, your where you've been, what you've experienced, and what you've given back to the world. I think it looks like you'd probably argue with me on this one, but it looks like you've given back more than you've taken. I imagine you'd argue that you've got a lot from all these experiences that you've accomplished and been around the world a few times, more than a few times. So after graduating from college, you decided to move on to a broader direction, which was at this point servicing uh, the service, I should say, of teaching and teaching schools. You were 2 years in the Peace Corps in the Philippines. Can you tell us about this experience and what did you learn about yourself and also from the people that you served?
Sure. Um, First of all, I learned that not everybody in the world expects the United States to be saviors. When we did our training in the Philippines, the Philippine American community there embraced the Peace Corps volunteers that were going to the Philippines. They had a lot of events. They had huge dinners and festivals and put on shows for us. And I'm perfectly honest in saying, when we got off the plane in Manila, I expected banners and leis and bands, and it's like, oh, we're just here. We're just here. And I realized my place, even the place in the US and the world, was not the foremost thing on people's minds. It really helped me get out of myself. It also helped me relax a little bit. I mean, I kicked up my heels in college, believe me, and I worked my way through college. I ran a TV camera 30 hours a week while going to school full time. Uh, got a lot of other part time jobs that all added to my experience. Uh, and I knew that there's got to be a work hard, play hard. And that was actually kind of a Kennedy Shriver legacy that we picked up on from some of the people in the staff, including some what they call Peace Corps volunteer leaders, people that had been in the Peace Corps for a while, volunteers that had been there for a while. And they helped us loosen up because pretty hard to stay on the straight and narrow in a place where you really don't know most people. It was hard for me to learn the language because my village in the Philippines was a combined village where ex-communist rebels had been promised free land if they would give up their arms, and they would be brought to Palawan and given free land, which they were. And as a result, there were 43 different languages and dialects just in the town I lived in. It was hard to latch on to one, and English was the language of instruction. So it was easy for me to stay in my little shell, but I broadened out. I connected. I learned to have fun as well as do service. I mean, service always mattered. That was what we're there for, and that's what all the volunteers were there for. There were one or two occasionally in my group really got out of line, and they were home. They were gone. You could have a good time away from your village, but enjoy the people, enjoy the connections you made, but you're there to work. When it was vacation, we played. So it was, I learned a little bit more balance too. And I learned a lot about different values. As I said, I grew up in a pretty conservative Catholic community, but one that taught a lot about social values and about being of service. And I broadened out and realized there was a much bigger world out there than I had been aware of. And it was a real eye opener for me.
Tell us what the Peace, I should have asked you to do this first. For those that don't know, what does the Peace Corps do exactly? What's the main mission? I mean, I think we're all aware of the Peace Corps, but what's the mission overall?
Well, it was founded in the 1960s, as you know, by President Kennedy, based on an idea that Hubert Humphrey before him had, but President Kennedy was the one that was in power to put it in place. There were three main goals. One was to be of service. One was to provide some skill that would assist developing countries. It was never to replace anybody. I could not be a teacher in a classroom alone. I could be what they call a co-teacher. I could bring in some new skills, some new techniques, some latest techniques that I would be trained in Manila and then bring down and train before we got in country during our Peace Corps training in Hawaii. And that was the first, no matter where you are, no matter what country you're serving in. And some were harder, some were easier. Mine was a pretty good challenge. There was no running water. There was no electricity. When it got dark, it got dark. Maybe you had candles and kerosene lanterns if you're lucky, and you could afford the kerosene for a couple hours. But there were volunteers in Nepal. I worked in some Nepal groups that were 3 days. Back in those days, they were 3 days walk from their mailbox. So if they wanted to get mail, they had 3 days for that. But mine was
Sounds like AOL.
Which I still have, which some people tell me it's time to at least go to Gmail.
Sorry, I couldn't resist.
So,
sorry.
The second purpose was to learn about other countries, other cultures, to be able to bring back to the United States an understanding of what else was going on in the world. And the third purpose of the Peace Corps was for other countries to understand more about the United States, about Americans, by having personal interaction, working with them, living in the same households, elbow to elbow, rubbing shoulders and sharing the same experiences and the same, I don't know if you call them hardships, but the same lifestyle. We didn't go off and live in some apartment house and leave them in the village without any electricity, water, and so forth, as I mentioned. So those are the three purposes of the Peace Corps, and those are still the purposes. I think over the years there has been, and there were in the beginning years, in the years I was there was still kind of a figuring out exactly how this was all going to be played out, because it was a broad mission, very general, which needed a little more structure to it. And I could see even in the groups that came in after me, they added more structure and people became more goal oriented. It was clear what was going on in general. Not always, but I think now the Peace Corps has even refined its mission more and provides even more service. And maybe some of the other missions haven't been regarded as quite as important, but I am not actively involved anymore. So it's hard to say that exactly.
Well, I checked out their website today, and I'm going to direct the listeners there if you're interested in becoming a volunteer or the different things that you can do with the Peace Corps. Really great organization, peacecorps.gov. So it's PEACE corps.gov. We'll be right back with more with author Jim Dries. Commies, Cuties, and the CIA is his new book. You got 2 minutes. Go buy a copy right now, and we'll see you back here in 2 minutes. Okay. Welcome back to the Jeremiah Show. We're talking with author Jim Dries. His new book is Commies, Cuties, and the CIA. Pick up a copy now. Throw it in a stocking near you. We were talking about the Peace Corps when we left for the break, Jim. The, after the service in the Philippines, your interest in Asia just grew stronger. You came back to the United States and you earned your master's degree in South Asian Studies at the University of Hawaii and the East West Center. How did you like University of Hawaii? I spent some time over there.
Oh God, I just hated it. I mean, the beach and, aloha shirts and shorts and, the girls in the bikinis. I mean,
Isn't it terrible?
it was just such a burden.
Why did you send me here? This is just too perfect.
Well, like I said, I grew up in an environment of a lot of pain and suffering, and I continued that right through graduate school. Not, it was great. I loved Hawaii.
We love you. Okay, so why do you love Asia so much? What drew you to studying Asia, visiting Asia, helping out in Asia? There's a draw you have. What drew you there, Jim?
Well, I think first of all, as I mentioned earlier, it was the idea of service. Where does it seem like a need is great? And as I grew up in the Society for the Propagation of Faith, saving these pagan babies, it created an interest. And then, as I say, when I got to the Philippines and learned more and studied more, I found that these people have independent, strong, viable, justifiable cultures and values of their own. And once I got there, I became fascinated with learning about different ways of thought, different ways of religious practice, different histories that were way longer than anything in Europe or the United States. And there were things there we could learn. There were things that ideas, concepts that would broaden my life and could broaden that of other people if I brought some of this back to the United States, which is always my home. I never wanted to go to Asia as an expatriate. I never wanted to live there the rest of my life, but I wanted to make connections to broaden our understanding of each other. I think there's so much misunderstanding still in the world, but have to work to make it better, have to work to take down those barriers. I mean, the ideas of Hinduism, the ideas of Buddhism, the ideas of Confucianism, the historical record, just was all fascinating to me.
You returned to the States after Hawaii and you went to New York, where you received an award from the Rockland County Bar Association for your work in law education. And from Hawaii to New York, I can't think of two more extreme. Was it a culture shock? Two different extreme places, from the gentle breezes and the palm trees and the sunsets and the pina coladas or mai tais to to New York City, cars and skyscrapers and lots of people. Was there a culture shock?
It was a little bit. There was always a little bit of a culture shock coming back to the United States and realizing you could find a switch on the wall and flip it and there'd be lights. You could go to this place called a sink and turn something on called a faucet and there'd be safe, drinkable water here. And you go down to a grocery store and walk down the aisles and you go, wow, look at the stuff. Look at the abundance. It's astonishing. And then New York. I remember when I had the interview in the school district that eventually hired me, I had to rent a car at the airport and drive from New York City to the suburban district that I was being interviewed for. And it was like, I was kind of like, can I make it through this traffic? Can I find where to turn? Interstate 1 is in Hawaii, but it's very hard to get on Interstate 1 and connect to the 5. You know, I couldn't find that bridge, but there was Interstate 1 in New York. There were lots of bridges, lots of connections, lots of places to get lost. Yeah, it was a bit of a culture shock, but it was
Yeah,
really
to get to the interstate in Hawaii, you don't go past the palm tree with the 3 coconuts and the pineapple field on the left.
right.
Um, okay, did I tell you Jim was just an adventurer, just a very, very cool guy? I'm gonna underline that right now with this one. 99, you volunteered to teach Sherpa students in Nepal. I don't know if I've ever put those words all together in one sentence and thought about them at all in my entire life.
You
Teach
did it. You did
Sherpa
it.
students in Nepal. That is so cool. Tell me about that, Jim. And then we got to take a break here.
Yeah. Well, Jeremiah, I'd been to Nepal in 65. I'd been there again for my research, 67, 68. The country just absolutely fascinated me. The mountains, the villages, the Mount Everest. I had trekked in the fall of 99, and I knew I wanted to go back to Everest Base Camp at some point. But I wanted to get to know the culture better. I wanted to get to know the people better. I wanted to just not be another tourist going through the area. So I thought, well, what can I do? Well, I could teach. So maybe I could teach school and then get to know the people, get to know the culture, and make some friends. And I did, and that's what happened. And the Sherpa children, the Sherpa culture, that's another variation on values, territory, people, history, and another time we'll talk about the Yetis. Anyway, so that's the Sherpa children teaching in Nepal.
Hmm. Did I say he was cool? Jim Dries, author of Commies, Cuties, and the CIA. We'll be right back. Last break, right? That was our last break? Okay. Well, Jim, so here's what I'd like to do on our last segment here is talk about maybe the love story meeting Carol. And you can weave in some of these adventures that you guys have done if you like, or I've got them down here in front of me. I can bring them up if you like. And then talk about the book, probably cap that. So that's like the last thing on everybody's mind. Sound good?
That was great, Jeremiah. Sounds great.
Okay, perfect. Welcome back to the Jim Dries Show. We're with Jim Dries, author, Commies, Cuties, and the CIA. Fascinating man, good friend. Now I think I can call him. So happy to see him and have some time to talk through and just barely scratch the surface of his fascinating life, the adventures. Um, Jim, you've been really pretty much everywhere. You've been around the world many, many times. You pursue, along with your wife, an active life of adventure. That's an understatement. Um, I'm just gonna quickly, just because we're running out of time, go through some of these um, places. Let's see. So I'm looking through. I'm like, which one do you talk about? There's so many great spots you've been around the world. Um, you've trekked to Mount Everest Base Camp with Carol. Um, you've had extensive travel and trekking in Latka and let's see here, technical mountain climbing. You're a professional guide in the Southern Alps of New Zealand. In Africa, you observed the mountain gorillas in the wild in Rwanda and Uganda. You also had a safari in Uganda and Tanzania. You skydived over New Zealand with Carol. You trekked to the base camp, and I'm going to need your help here on this one. Is it Kanchenjunga?
Katsanjunga. Katsanjunga.
It's the third highest peak in the world. You've trekked through western Nepal. You did whitewater rafting in the mountains of Nepal. You toured and visited Tibet. You've done bareboat sailing in the British Virgin Islands. What is bareboat sailing?
Bareboat sailing is essentially you get a group of people and you just rent a boat, and it's essentially it's got the mast and the steering wheel and those things, but you buy the gas, you buy the groceries, you pay for all the upkeep. Obviously, you pay a significant amount to just use it. And the group I got connected with through a friend, was a group of about 70 people from the Toronto Yacht Club who in the middle of winter wanted a yacht to take to get some yachts and do some sailing, and I got to be able to connect with this group, and they call it charter sailing.
Well, you need a camera
Yeah,
crew.
that guy
I want
sounds.
to know when the autobiography is going to come out, because we don't have enough time to capture all these great stories that you have probably for each one of these places I mentioned, and there's more. I haven't mentioned all of them. Um, well, you think about that. I'd love to read it when you get when you get it out there. I had a question though, and I was reading, through some of your adventures and talking to you about them. Um, it struck me that a lot of people out there that are listening right now, including myself sometimes, put off their adventures in life until retirement, or one day I'll do that, or I can't do that right now, but one day I'll do that. What do you say to that mindset? Can you let's convince them that one day may never happen. Do it today.
Yeah, it was. I got motivated by the fact that during that last year of teaching, when I love teaching, people say, "Oh, you taught in New York schools; it must be awful." Well, maybe they're thinking of some inner city school, but not where I taught. Rockland County, South Orangetown School District, fabulous people, fabulous group, great programs like the law program that I was part of. I can tell lots of stories on that, but that's another time. By the way, I want to correct you if I may, please. It's not the Jim Dries show. I believe it's the Jeremiah show, but thank you. I wouldn't want that responsibility.
Here
That
we
is,
go, arguing again.
and I think Carol is right. My life has been a miracle, and my brother died at 64. Never got a chance to really enjoy life. We'd been at a family reunion that summer, and we were talking about all the stuff we are going to do when we retired, how we're going to go fishing again, like we used to do when we were kids. Dropped dead from a heart attack. Boom.
Mhm.
And then I got an invitation to go trekking in Nepal, to go to Kanchenjunga Base Camp. I got a second wife who said, "I got somebody better," and it was like, okay, I think the signals are clear. Time to move on, and this great adventure awaited me, and I took advantage of it, and I was been very blessed. And it's like, it's not that I retired; I just got another life. I just got reborn in a different way. And Carol and I getting together, that was kismet, serendipity, whatever you want to call it, because I wasn't supposed to be in California the weekend that I was there, in that part of California. She wasn't supposed to be there. There we were. Ended up, she had a ticket to a concert that was in Bel Air, in a home of a Gershwin family. That was like, whoa, this is really interesting. And she discovered that I'd always been interested in acting. I'd done a little bit early in my life. I wanted to dip my toe in it. She had always been waiting for the next audition, waiting for the next audition, never took a moment off to do that adventure travel. If she did some travel, it was working. She worked in Japan, she worked in Switzerland. So we put it together. She reignited my interest, helped me point the way to some great adventures with theater, directing, acting, commercials. We're doing a commercial this Thursday. We got the Washington, D.C. showing of Lillian Carter this Sunday. And she said, yeah, I can travel. So she came, she taught school with me, with the Peace Corps kids, and then we both went to base camp, like we say, and so it's continued. It just keeps unfolding. And I love bingo, but I just can't, my life can't be those 2 hours a week playing bingo. It's like, there's got to be something to do. You just gave me an idea about my autobiography. That just sounds so self-centered, though.
Uh, you've got so many great stories, and so you've contributed so much. I personally think sharing our stories with the world, um, we all learn. I've learned so much in this 1 hour with you, Jim. The listeners all around the world that are tuning into this story of yours, you, in some ways, I guess saying it's a duty or an obligation is too strong, but it feels like to me, I tell my mom this all the time. She has taken care of children for I don't know, forever since I'm still here. I'm still a child, so she's still taking care of children in her own family. But she has a business that she takes care of children and she teaches them, and a lot of it's based on nature and being outside and looking at the leaves and the flowers and the trees and the you know becoming independent as little people. And I always tell her, and you should share that with what you see all day long. And I think all of us learn from human behavior, human experiences, and stories. And you have so many. Your life's been dedicated in so many ways to fellow humans, and like I said at the beginning, unselfishly teaching, learning, and listening, and all the things I would be fascinated by, and around the world. So I don't know. I'll read it. I'm sure a lot of others would as well. So I don't think it's selfish or self-serving or whatever you said, but I think it's a um, to me in a way it's like share those things. That's why you experience them all. For to pass on. Somebody may pick something up out of it. Somebody may not, but you most likely you'll reach people. So anyway, that's my pitch for you to do your autobiography.
Thank you, Jeremiah. I'm trying to figure out my next project. And by the way, in terms of what to do with your life, I know that in the Lily Carter show, there was a moment where President Carter had lost the re-election bid. He was home, and his mom, who had, as we know, had joined the Peace Corps when she was 68, said, "What are you going to do with the rest of your life? It's not over." I remember seeing a commercial when I was still teaching and my kids were young, and it was a group of people, a small group of people, obviously in a tent, open-sided tent in Africa with the wind kind of blowing around. It's hot, it's humid. This younger guy, maybe 30s, is looking at this older man who's part of his team and looks at him and says, "What are you going to do when you are retired?" And the man says back, "Oh, I am retired." So, you're never too old to do things, and it's never too early, never too late to say, "I can do that." I was just reading a book not too long ago by about a woman who survived the Holocaust, eventually became a high school counselor, and she had a great story to tell too. Now, those are people with great stories. She was sitting around with like her high school principal one day and said, "I'd like to get a doctorate, but I might be 50 when I get a doctorate." And he said, "You're going to be 50 anyway. You want to be 50 with a doctorate or without a doctorate?" Exactly. She got her doctorate. She became a world famous public speaker to all kinds of groups. So you're never too old. It's never too late. And life continues as long as you want it to continue. And we're all miracles. Jeremiah, you're a miracle. What you do is miraculous. I really hope you have learned so much. You ought to write about all these shows. You ought to talk about the people that have been in your shows. My God, you have such a wealth of information that you could share. Well, I toss the ball back to you.
A lot of good stories. I won't deny that. A lot of great guests over the years, Jim, including your wife, Carol Swarbrick. So let's talk about the book, Commies, Cuties, and the CIA before we say goodbye. And what drew you to subject matter?
Well, first of all, Commies, Cuties, and the CIA was the admonition that then Vice President Lyndon Johnson gave Sergeant Shriver when he was the first director of the Peace Corps. And he said, "Don't get yourself or your volunteers involved with commies, cuties, or the CIA. Then you're gonna spoil it. You're gonna cause scandals and spoil it." I think we all know what most of those mean. And so we got a lot of stories I could talk about those things. So I got inspired by some of those thoughts to share some of the stories that I experienced in a fictional form. Like I say, a friend asked me in the beginning of this book, we mentioned it, there's an attempt on Robert Kennedy's life in the Philippines. That didn't happen, but he did go to the Philippines. He was on a peace mission. I was there. Some of the things I described in the book happened, and then it becomes fiction. But a lot of the other things are inspired by my experiences, by people I met, or actually combinations. There's nobody in the book except for historical characters like Sergeant Shriver and Robert Kennedy Jr. that are actually true characters, but they're combinations of characters and experiences. So another time we can read the book and we'll talk about, was that true? Wasn't that true? What made you think of that? So it's a book about adventure, excitement, interesting women, and based on a true story to some little small degree, and a little insight into what it might be like to be a Peace Corps volunteer without all the exotic international conspiracies involved.
Well, yeah, I would. I'll get a copy of the book. Um, like I said, I'll read it over Thanksgiving week, and then I'd love to have you come back and talk about actually just the book if you'd like to add to this interview. Um, what are your proudest? You got to be proud of so much, Jim. Proudest accomplishments in life, do you think?
Uh, well, they'd have to be this beautiful marriage I have to Carol, which is just inspirational. That's a miracle. Um, the three marvelous children that I was able to be part of raising, even though it was after a few years joint custody and a not real happy divorce. They came out of it amazingly, all very strong, independent people on their own with their own families, and wonderful grandchildren. And the people and the situations that I've been able to be involved with. I mean, my world is so big. There are so many great people, from students that I remember, from people I worked with, people like yourself I've gotten to know only since I've been retired. Uh, it's just been a whole bunch of wow experiences, uh, things that I never thought would happen. And it's just too hard to enumerate each one beyond that. But I have really been blessed. I have really been blessed. And Jeremiah, I do hope we're friends. I like to think of that. And you certainly are one of the highlights of my life. Every time I meet somebody amazing like you, it just adds another little jewel to the crown of my life.
I think it's safe to say that Jim and I've got a mutual respect for each other, and we're going to continue to argue about which one is cooler, I'm sure, for many, many years to come. The book, the love story between Carol Swarbrick, your wife, and Jim Dries, they wrote you guys wrote a book together called Better Late Than Never, a love story by Jim Dries and Carol Swarbrick Dries. So if you want to read the love story, there it is. And Commies, Cuties, and the CIA is the latest book by Jim Dries, author Jim Dries. Jim Dries has written for theater, Miss Lillian, More Than a President's Mother. Jim is an actor. Jim is a teacher, a Peace Corps volunteer, member, trainer. He is an adventurer around the world. He is a lover of life. Um, what else did I forget, Jim? You've directed, you've done it all. You've done a lot. You've done a lot of great things with your life, and continue to do so. No slowing down. Um, Jim, thank you so much for joining us.
Jeremiah, thank you for your generosity. Thank you for your interest, and keep the Jeremiah show going. 500 more and 500 more after that.
Okay, we will do that. I promise you. Communicate, listen more, and evolve. And you've been listening to the Dries Show. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I would love to read the book and actually do like get into it if you want. We can do another one.